Hi guys, it's Kristy Chapman here, and I'm going to show you guys how to create your own presets in Lightroom. So this is a photo that I have of my son playing in the water in the spring after all the snow that we get is melting. So let's go into the Develop module here, and I have the basic panel open. And what I'm just going to do is edit the photo a little bit to my liking. So I'm just going to very quickly kind of bring down the exposure here. There's a couple areas where there's some clipping, so I'm going to bring down the highlights. I'm going to bring up the shadows just so we can see him a little bit better, maybe even the whites a little bit, bring down the blacks. And as you'll see, I just kind of work my way down in the basic panel. And bring down the clarity, and I think we'll just warm up this image a little bit. There we go. So just to give this a bit of a stylistic look, I'm going to go into the tone curve. I'm going to give this photo a bit of a matte look. So we're just going to bring sort of the whitest whites down and bring up the blackest of blacks. And it gives it sort of a matte, and you can toggle this little button here on and off just to see what the difference is. We'll do a little bit of a S curve here. There we go. So again, toggling on and off. So I like this look. Now the fun part is, let's say that this was a look that I wanted to apply to many other images later on. So we're just going to come over here to the preset panel, and we're going to create a new preset. So automatically Lightroom suggests that you put your new preset in the user preset folder. So that's what we're going to do, and let's just call this for now. We'll call it Kristy. Not very imaginative. You can probably come up with a better name. And let's check all so that all the changes that we made to this photo would be applied to a new one. So create, and there it is, Kristy. So if we move along to another photo, let's say we want to apply this preset there, and you know that if you hover over the preset, your little preview window here will show you what it could look like. So let's click. And so it applied the preset, and it's not that bad. It actually looks really good. And what we would probably do with any preset that you apply, whether you've bought a preset, whether you're using the Lightroom presets that come preloaded, odds are you'll still have to edit the photo just a little bit. So because every picture is different. So we'll just brighten this one up and maybe even just cool it down a little bit by adding a little bit of blue, because this image was a little bit, was warm to begin with. And bring up the shadows a little bit so we can see his face. So that actually worked out really good. So now we have a preset that we can apply to many different images. So let's try a different image here. So I have this one image of my son brushing his teeth. It's an image that I've already edited, as you can see. And if you press Y shortcut on your keyboard, you'll see what the before picture looked like and the after picture. So I've already improved the photo to my liking. But I really like this new sort of matte look that I've created, so I'd like to apply it. So when I apply it to my image, it seems to have overwritten or taken away a lot of the edits that I already did, and that definitely isn't what I want. So it's actually a little bit frustrating. So the way that we can avoid this is that when you create your preset, be very mindful of what you're going to check off. So for this image, let's go back into the preset. We're going to right click and say Update with Current Settings. And I haven't changed any of the original settings that I did on this preset. So really, when you think about it, I don't need all of these settings to be clicked. So I'm going to do check none just to get rid of most of them. And you kind of have to ask yourself, what was the main changes to this image that created the look that you're going for? So if you're going to create a preset, sometimes you have to kind of think in advance of what you're actually doing. So for this image, the fact that I brought the exposure down, the fact that I brought the highlights down, has nothing to do with the actual look of the preset. It just so happened that this photo was overexposed. So I think that, if I remember correctly, the edits that we made that kind of make this photo what it is not necessarily the exposure or the highlights, probably not even the shadows, but maybe the whites and the blacks, definitely what we did in the tone curve, and maybe even the clarity. And probably that is it. We didn't touch any of the other things here. I'm not going to do the white balance because I think white balance is unique to each image. So unless you are specifically creating a very cool or warm preset, then there's no reason to click it. So let's update. Let's go back to this image. If we just go down into history, we can undo that preset. And let's try to apply the preset again and see what happens this time. So this time it only affected the settings where we had checked the box off, and therefore it didn't affect all the other settings that we had already pre-established or already edited in the photo. So that's something just to keep in mind when you're creating your presets. So let's do another one just for fun here. So here's an image, and maybe for an image like this, let's do something that's really high contrast, lots of vibrance, lots of saturation. Let's bring the blacks down, the whites up, really make it a high contrast image. And just to see what we're doing here, I'm going to bring up the exposure because this one's a little dark. And maybe we'll just add a little bit of red to that. And when I do a high contrast image, maybe I would also like to add in a really cool vignette. So there we go. Do something like that. So if I were to create a preset for this, we'll come over here, create a preset, and let's call this contrast. And now I know, I'm going to check none. Now I know that I only want specific settings to be captured here. So probably the contrast, the whites, the blacks, maybe the shadows. I didn't touch the tone curve or the clarity, vibrance and saturation definitely, and I added the vignette. So those are the only items that I need to click, create, and there we go. And so now I can apply that preset to other, what did we call it? Oh yes, contrast. So we can add it to this one. Didn't add much of a difference there. Let's try this image again. Contrast. And there we go. So now I added the effect without changing the image too much. So have a lot of fun creating presets. As you can see, I've created a lot of presets for myself. I have a lot of fun with them, and it's really a great way to play around with your images. And if you have sort of a style or a look that you really like, that you find is sort of your own, create a preset and then you can apply it to all your images going forward. So have a lot of fun with that and enjoy.